She said, what if you just made your own video? So I go, okay. And I made a little video. The ask being, friends in Wuhan, forward this video. Our son, Long Long, wants to reunite with his foster grandma. And in a city of 11 million people, it took us 48 hours.
Wow.
And we were on the phone with her.
Welcome to Notes from Video Village, where marketers share their thoughts and experiences on everything video, from their personal journeys into the industry to their perspectives on content strategy, budgeting, and the art of producing broadcast commercials, internal videos, social media reels, and beyond. I'm your host, Dan Lichtenberg, and today I'm excited to talk with Ling Woo Liu. Ling is the Senior Director of Marketing and Communications for the San Francisco Foundation. She has some amazing insights into how nonprofits should be thinking about video. Let's get into it. So yeah, first, thanks for sitting down with me and talking about how you've used video in your marketing campaigns. Tell me a little bit about who you are, what your title is, and where you work.
My name is Ling Woo Liu, and I'm the Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at the San Francisco Foundation. I grew up in the Bay Area, child of Chinese American immigrants, and roughly the first half of my career I spent as a journalist working in the US and in Asia and working really with multimedia news. I did print, I did TV, I did documentary film, worked at a wire service briefly, and then made a pivot to nonprofit communications when I joined the Asian Law Caucus. My first nonprofit, I still kind of consider it my nonprofit alma mater. And I also consider myself very lucky that my first nonprofit job was at such an amazing legacy pillar organization here in the Bay Area. And then from there, have worked in philanthropy, a couple different foundations. And as I said, currently at the San Francisco Foundation, where I've been for 7 years now.
Nice. That's awesome. It's cool because you have a background where you already understood the power of video, probably going into your more like marketing comms roles. So when you made the transition to the nonprofit world, what was the first time you remember making a video?
My position at the Asian Law Caucus was the first staff member of a brand new program that was just coming off the ground that was called the Fred Korematsu Institute for Civil Rights and the Constitution. Fred Korematsu was an American civil rights hero. He was one of the 4 individuals to have challenged the Japanese American incarceration all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Asian Law Caucus was very involved. 40 years after Korematsu was found guilty of betraying the incarceration order, Asian Law Caucus and other young attorneys jumped in the 1980s, and they were able to challenge that conviction and vacate the decision. Fast forward another couple of decades or so, and the caucus decided to create a new program that was all around Fred Korematsu's legacy and all that he represented. And I hadn't worked at a nonprofit before, but I came in with this news and communications background, and we did a lot of video work. One of the first things we did was a very grassroots produced PSA in the office that was about why this concept of a Fred Korematsu Day would be important. And so we got a bunch of talent in, and really it was like a lot of staff from the caucus, friends of those staffers, et cetera, and tried to get a pretty diverse bunch of folks to come in and talk about why it was an important legacy to remember. And it was a lot of fun. And, we did it on a very, very low budget.
Yeah, it sounds like I was about to say it was a shoestring budget. I mean, you're in your news background, they're probably not huge crews or anything like that either, but I'm sure you at least had some budgets to work with, and there was more of a priority probably placed on the production values. What did you learn from the shoestring budget?
We were on a pretty shoestring video budget in my last news organization as well. I was at Time Magazine in Hong Kong, which was their Asia headquarters. But very often it was me and a camera, and that was it. I mean, really, nothing more than that, because video was still being tested. Time, comes from a magazine background, and so we were moving a lot more heavily into the digital space, and we weren't resourced at all. We probably had better budget when I got to Asian Law Caucus. But I think when you have a good story, you don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles. And what we had was a compelling story. We were advocating to get Fred Korematsu Day passed in the state of California, and we got it done. with a lot of community support. It was the first day named after an Asian American. And at this point in time, so this was in 2010, 14 years later, this day is recognized in perpetuity in 7 states. It has also been recognized in different municipalities, school level, etcetera. We had a good story. We had something exciting that was newsworthy, and it was based on a very, very compelling piece of history and, an individual who a lot of people could identify with. He was a guy going about his own business who didn't think it was right for him to be incarcerated. And he stood up, spoke his voice, and, challenged it up to the highest court. And that was something that, as compelling as it was, we also knew that it was a story that the vast majority of Americans had never heard of, much less the entire internment.
Why did that need to be a video in your mind? Why wasn't it just a press release or a newsletter or something like that?
I mean, the concept of Fred Korematsu Day was brand new. We wanted to show that it wasn't something only relevant to Japanese Americans, only relevant to Asian Americans. We wanted to show that it was relevant to any American because what he did was very American. He spoke out freely. He challenged a moment of injustice using our justice system. It didn't work out in his favor, but ultimately, there was a day of reckoning when the case was reopened.
Fast forwarding through the next few years, other videos that you made that you felt like were really impactful or you learned really good lessons from making them?
Yeah, so we're just coming off the heels of San Francisco Foundation's 75th anniversary. I'm still in recovery mode. So it was the year 2023. We took the opportunity the whole year to celebrate an organization that's been around for 3/4 of a century and really been involved in so many of the progressive movements in the Bay Area, from civil rights in the 1950s, soon after we began, to we were the biggest funder of LGBTQIA organizations in the 70s before you had standalone foundations that were really target supporting those organizations. To our work on the AIDS epidemic, to our work on disability rights, to the work on, housing and racial equity today. And so it was such a great story to be able to delve into as we prepared for the anniversary, and also one where we felt strongly that there needed to be a video component, that not everyone was going to read the book that we ultimately produced, but to be able to offer it in digestible ways for different audiences. So, there was the print element, which is also online. We also did this kind of interactive tour on our website, and then the video component. We did produce some more traditional videos featuring interviews and oral histories, but we also tried our hand for the first time at animation. We produced a couple cartoon animated videos, one about Fred Blackwell, that's our CEO, and his own personal story of how he was first exposed to issues of racial equity as a kid growing up in Oakland. And so it's about Fred riding his bike through different neighborhoods in Oakland and observing the differences that he saw in communities and how his parents, were able to explain to him those differences and how that ultimately led to him being at this intersection of place and race and community and leading this very influential organization today. It was a lot of fun, but, definitely something we hadn't tried before.
That sounds like a really cool, interesting piece. What do you think was like ended up being really successful about that video in your mind?
I mean, I think it was just a different take at it. We do a lot of communications, obviously about our work, about our grant making, our partnerships, our work with donors, our events and whatnot. But to tell a very, very personal story about our leader further just humanizes him. I think it brings audiences closer to him. And when you tell a story from, I mean, literally from the street view, because he's on a bike in the video, a mongoose with all the trimmings is how he describes it. You're brought down to the street view and able to see what he's seeing at a very impressionable age. And so I think that that's just much more relatable than another strategy that we might have tried to explain our work. via the values of our leader, I think it helps explain who we are as an organization.
Yeah, it sounds like it really humanizes the story.
Right. 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 I think one for me that I thought might be fun to talk to you about was actually a personal video that I made. So nothing to do with my professional career. In 2018, my husband and I traveled to China to adopt our younger son, who
Oh,
was raised by a foster grandma in Wuhan, China. Folks maybe didn't so much know Wuhan before COVID, but they know that name now. And he came to us when he was almost 3 years old. And the the adoption process didn't allow us to be in contact or to meet the foster grandmother or foster families. And so there was no way to contact them. I mean, we were certainly thankful when we picked him up. You know, we left them with a thank you note and gifts for having raised him. And then so, with no way to contact them, we came back and, suddenly we're living this crazy life with 2 young boys trying to adjust to our new normal and didn't give that topic much thought. And then COVID hits. Folks in Wuhan are getting very sick. They're stuck in these buildings, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, is foster grandma okay?" And so the thought just kind of formed in my head, I need to find her. And so I started contacting whoever I could and got in touch with a journalist in Wuhan. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is easy. There's a little bit going on right now, but maybe when our lockdown ends, I can help you with it. And of course, we know what happened with the rest of the world and our own country with COVID. And, her initial reaction was that this is so easy because everyone in China is online and specifically on a certain platform called WeChat, which is the one social media network. But a few months later, she says to me, maybe we need to hold off on this because tensions between our countries are not particularly good. And this is at a time when our then president was up there saying Kung flu, China virus. And she's like, I can't even go there. That you're based in the US, it is too sensitive. A couple more years go by. Oh, relations are not getting any better. Some have described the current US China relationship as having hit an all time low since, like, I don't know, the Cultural Revolution, Mao. And so I go back to her and I'm like, what can we do? Because China had a very strict COVID restrictions for a couple of years. And then about a year and a half ago, they suddenly did away with everything and people were getting sick again. And she said, why don't you try social media? What if you just made your own video? It doesn't have to go through the news media. So I go, okay. And I made a little video. The ask being, friends in Wuhan, forward this video. Our son, Long Long, wants to reunite with his foster grandma. He is grateful to her. She raised him and he is doing well. It was like a 40-second little video with me stumbling through my Chinese. And I send it off to like an embarrassingly short list of WeChat friends that I have in my network in China. My cousin, the journalist friend, this other random friend, the lady who owns a Wuhan restaurant nearby me here, um, and Dan, in a city of 11 million people, it took us 48 hours
wow.
and we were on the phone with her.
Wow.
I mean, it was mind blowing because my son, he had asked me, he's like, are we going to find her? And I said, look, we are going to try, but this is a pretty tough search that we've embarked on. I was like, it's 11 million people. That's like a mid-sized city in China. I have no idea. We had an image of her. We had a screenshot of her. And of course, we had images of him. And that's it.
Wow.
And then we had the 40-second video with me saying, residents in Wuhan, help us find her.
Wow.
It was overnight. And so that could not have been done without a video.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. It couldn't have been done. These little tiny reels that were being served up on social media, sometimes they're about a little boy like trying to connect to his roots. And we had our first phone call with her, and it just felt like she was giving us everything from the before bookend. And we were giving her everything from after this bookend. Her story led up to a day where we picked him up, and our story started that day, right? And we started this relationship. We were able to visit her 6 months later. But like after that first call, I asked Long Long, my son, and I said, how do you feel? You just talked to foster grandma. And, he was 7 at the time. And we were washing dishes together. He wasn't looking at me. I wasn't looking at him. And he just said, "I feel more home." And I was like, I could not have asked you to describe that more powerfully. Like, he didn't have all the words, but I was just like, I think what it gave him was this grounding. For me, that's not my professional work, that was my personal work, but it was a video that cost me nothing. It was a video that didn't take a ton of time to produce, but it was a clear call to action, right? Um, and it doesn't always work, and this one, you know, worked. And I still pinch myself because I didn't know that that was ever something we could check off.
That's so cool. Yeah, and it's funny because like so much of video content now like is just somebody talking into a phone, and you can see how powerful it can be in your personal life and your networks and your reach and for all kinds of reasons. And also even a lot of companies now just do that type of video too.
Right. That search was something that should never have been complicated, but it was. It was complicated by so many different things, the restrictions around adoption at the time, but it was also complicated by, like, these geopolitics
Yeah.
somehow made something as innocuous as this political. Should not have been. It should not have been difficult. And then you turn to this medium, and it's not just between the US and China, but so many other countries, where we're prevented from making these connections on a very human level.
Congrats to you and your son for making that happen.
And like I said, we about 6 months after we reconnected with her, we got to go visit her last fall.
That's such an interesting story that you just told because the smallest, most basic, most unproduced video can have such a huge impact. Is maybe that's a good lead into my next question. When you look back at your career, you look back at your life, how you've seen video has changed and different strategies being used.
Well, I think the technology has to be the biggest change. I started out with, news crews and documentary crews, and this is certainly still how very good filmmaking is made, but it's a lot of equipment. It's very expensive. It has to be maintained or it has to be replaced. And the fact that strong videos can now be made, with a cell phone and an external mic, it's pretty dramatic in time savings and cost savings. And that, I mean, that isn't to say that one should not produce highly produced videos, because we still do that. But I think technology has to be one of the biggest changes. And so it's made it a lot more accessible, especially for the nonprofit sector. You have the ability to get in there and to share content and to push out campaigns in a way that was not accessible to organizations on a budget in the past. And I think that it will continue to change. And you can probably tell me more than I could ever tell you about what is happening with AI and how that's going to impact all of us, but we're right here at the start of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was definitely like a 2 to 4 week period there where like OpenAI and all these other were making these announcements around that stuff. It was just like so scary for all kinds of reasons. One is like the possibilities of like deception and fake news and all that stuff. And then also, so it's like, wow, is this gonna replace me? Is this I'm still in the phase of like just being intimidated and trying to learn as much as I can about it. And what I'm seeing is like these sort of generative tools that make stuff from scratch are really, really bad and rudimentary, and maybe they'll get better and better. But I'm seeing there's more and more tools that are trying to be smart about like empowering creators. So it's more like a tool than it is like total replacement. So it's like a tool to master like some of the things we already do, just applying AI to it to speed things up. To whether it's like a green screen turning into a background really quickly, or it's like cleaning up audio really quickly, or it's transcribing interviews really quickly with AI. Whole
That's
stuff.
very exciting.
Yeah, yeah. So we have a tool now that we use regularly that's just like it takes, this Zoom, it'll take the Zoom feed and just turn into text. And with, 80 to 90% accuracy, maybe not as good as a human, but it's one of those things that actually will really benefit a lot of workflows, a lot of creators. I think it's hard to know what's going to happen, but we're definitely paying attention to all this stuff.
Yeah. I think those of us who are content creators there's a lot more apprehension. It is our trade that might be used willy nilly. I mean, there was a case in the news about someone who sued their employer based on a set of racist recordings using the boss's voice, but generating false recordings.
Wow.
That's horrifying.
Yeah. You've probably been in this situation before where you like go and you get an interview and then let's say the subject just says something a little wrong or like not the most concisely and you're like, I wish they had just said it like this certain way. There are now tools where you can actually try to generate those like little pieces of the sound bites to make it more seamless and more concise. And it's like, well, okay, we can do that, but should we do that as journalists or filmmakers or marketers? Like, is that ethical? So I think, yeah, there's going to be a whole slew of ethical questions that are super tricky.
Because if you can add a word to preface a statement, you can add the whole statement.
You could add, yeah, whole things. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could probably just, and then it's like, well, it's on video. And then what is your comms team is going to take that soundbite and then like put it into a press release. And all of a sudden it's like something that this person said, even though they never said it. And it could be reflective of their general thoughts and opinions, but it could not.
Yeah, there's a lot to absorb. Technology, ever changing.
Are there any other like big things that you've seen in video marketing and how maybe how nonprofits are using video or just generally that you think are going to be big sea change kind of things in the future?
We've actually spent a fair amount of time over the last couple of years building our TikTok audience. We had a specific strategy around it where we were wanting to grow our younger followers. We produced videos that were based on a virtual tour of racial equity history in the Bay Area. And we partnered with local community leaders who knew that area or knew that site very well. So, as an example, we in downtown San Francisco, our office is very close to Kearny Street, which used to be the heart of Little Manila. And there is a building there now that's called the International Hotel, the I Hotel for short, which was the site of an incredibly traumatic and significant moment in equitable housing history in San Francisco, where in the 70s, it had mainly been inhabited by older Filipino male workers, the manongs, who, after a like decade long multiracial fight to try to protect that housing and these men, they were evicted in a very traumatizing moment, but it remains a very significant historic site. And after many years, it was actually brought back as affordable housing, I think in partnership with the Chinatown Community Development Center. So it's a gleaming new version of itself, continues to represent affordable housing. There's like pieces of the original building that are now in their lobby in a beautiful museum. But what we decided to do to connect a younger TikTok audience to a historic site was that we partnered with a San Franciscan named Franco Finn, who happens to be Filipino American. He's also the hype man for the Warriors. So anyone who goes to a Warriors game, they know that Franco is their longtime guy, making all the announcements at Chase Center. And so we had him standing in front of the site and giving us a little tour of the I Hotel and a little Filipino American history and housing history in San Francisco. And so we kind of repeated that concept at sites throughout the Bay Area and in different counties because we want folks to also realize that there is racial equity and social justice history all around us. It's not just Oakland and San Francisco where people know a lot more about that history, but it's everywhere in every county. And so that was a little strategy that we produced these little TikTok videos. And ultimately, within about a year or so, we went from like 0 followers because we just opened our account to roughly 5,000 where we're at now. So it's been fun and it's been a good challenge to us to figure out how do we meet a target audience where they are on a
Yeah.
format that they can engage with.
No, that's a really interesting campaign that you did. And I think other nonprofits will be super interested in that. It sounds like a lot of the organizing aspects took a lot of time and maybe resources, but the actual production itself probably didn't take much resources, probably just a phone with a guy, right?
I walked into the I Hotel, the International Hotel, and it's housing, but it's also a nonprofit space. And I walked in and the lovely executive director said, "Oh, we've made some room for when your crew gets here." And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm the crew. I'm very sorry to disappoint you, but myself and my iPhone will be the crew." I was probably there for an hour or so, getting a little B-roll, getting Franco doing a little clip on the street. And it's been similar types of shoots where there's a newish mural depicting the women of the Black Panther Party in Oakland. And so we partnered with a former member of the Black Panther Party who's a woman, and she was able to stand in front of the mural and tell us the significance of the mural as a local community leader who lived the history and knows it on a personal level far better than having someone from the foundation who could describe it, but we didn't live it.
And it probably felt a lot more authentic because it was just a
Yeah.
phone and you don't feel like there's any buffer or filter between your audience and these people and these people's authentic stories. So it probably was a really smart way to approach making a TikTok video.
This may not be the audience that is going to watch the documentary that came out a couple years ago about the party, or the documentary about the International Hotel, or even read any type of long form content online.
Yeah. And or maybe they will watch the documentary, but maybe like after they watch your TikTok reel and maybe a few years later, after it resonates with them, it becomes something that they're interested in, that mural, and they get a poster of the mural for their bedroom. And then finally they go and watch the documentary, you know? So
Right. And if if it earned us followers who can see our brand and see our organization as one that continues to share content and help inform them about the Bay, racial equity, about housing, about policies that they should be aware of, then as that population of the group of followers get older, there may be ways that their behaviors change and the ways that they engage change. Right.
that's so cool. And I'm glad this came up in our conversation because I think there are probably so many other nonprofits thinking, how can I engage with TikTok, or just like super intimidated, or maybe they just dismiss it. Right. And I think that's a good lesson, especially when something becomes a platform where a lot of people get their news. You can't just dismiss the platform.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that about covers all the questions I wanted to ask. I appreciate you taking the time, and all the insights, especially for our nonprofit audience, is going to be great. Yeah, excited to have you on this.
Notes from Video Village is a project of Slow Clap. This episode was produced by myself, Beizhou Li Wei, with help from Katie Bales, Jersa Hicks, Jake Richard, Alexander Flores, and Dan Lichtenberg. Join us next time for an interview with creative director Jeremy Brady, and go to our website at slowclap.com to listen to past episodes or read any episode as a transcript. And don't forget to follow us at Notes from Video Village on Spotify.